How's everybody doing today? Good. So wonderful to see all the beautiful faces here. So just want to say a few remarks before I turn it over to Dave Emery. My name's Steve Gizzard from Wiley. I've had the pleasure of serving as the AMM's president this past year. I'd like to welcome everybody, including those that are also virtually, but more importantly, those that have made the effort coming in person, to the AMM's November Educational Forum. The AMM is thrilled to be finally hosting an in-person educational forum. This is our first since before the pandemic. I'm excited to introduce our special panel in a moment. Before that, I would like to share a few things about the exciting things going on within the AMM. Just last month, we had our fall fundraiser, Ping Pong for Parkinson's, and I think those that were there thought this was a really, really great event. Thank you to everybody who came out to see us in person. It was a fun night, it was a new location, and it was something different. And of course, it was for a great cause. If you haven't seen the pictures yet, please visit the AMM website, or of course our Facebook page. Next month, on December 13th, the AMM will be hosting a holiday party here in New York City at the Gem Saloon. I hope you'll join us for that special event. Sign up is on the AMM website, and we encourage everybody to bring an unwrapped gift for Toys for Tots. One of the most exciting things we've been working on over the last year is our special report series. Each special report takes a snapshot of our community's take on a key issue. We go well beyond survey results, sharing comments from participants. Our latest topic was a look at the current state of play when it comes to RFPs, and there was some very interesting reading within that. So look forward to hearing people's views on that. You can find the full series online on our site, or if you need it sent to you, you can email our office at help@ammonline.org. We had hoped to have John Bigelow, our resident elections expert, be with us today, and after the panel share his take on what the recent midterm elections mean for our industry. Unfortunately, John couldn't join us today, but please look for a video update from him in the near future. I would like to take a moment to remind us all here that before we know it, the 2023 Nexus Awards will be here. The next iteration of this special event will be on Wednesday, May 17th. We will be returning to Liberty State Park with that wonderful venue, beautiful view, and hopefully fireworks again to cap off the evening. I think it will actually end a little bit early this year so we can see the fireworks in their full glory. Planning committee is hard at work putting everything together to build on last year's successes, make it easier for folks to attend. More to come on that in the next few months. Finally, while we've had a number of virtual events in the last 2 years, today marks my one chance, while president, to be with you all in person and with everybody joining us virtually. It's been an honour to serve the AMM and the organisation, and I would like to thank you all for this opportunity. I've been in academic publishing for the last 16 years, and one thing I've learned very deeply is an incredible number of smart people within this industry who are all working together to meet the needs of our constituents, whether that's medical societies, pharmaceutical companies, device companies, and everyone that we work with. So thank you all for your participation. On that note, please, if you can, participate within the AMM with the committees, do anything you can to advance the cause of this. We're working together, publishers, agencies, and everybody involved in this industry. And thank you to everybody that's already got involved. And I'm going to make this last call for everybody to get involved, if you can, please. So, without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce the panel for today and turn over to Dave Emery. Moderating today's panel is someone who's very familiar to us all. Dave Emery is the past president of the AMM and the director at Kantar Media. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Dave, who will introduce our panelists and kick things off.
So I'm actually going to let Keira and Kerrie and Megan introduce themselves to just give a little quick background. Before we get going, though, what I wanted to do is share a little bit of information from some research that we've recently conducted that should set a context for the discussion today, which is about journals and print and kind of where it fits into media campaigns today. It's interesting. I mean, we're coming out of the election, midterm election, and I see an analogy here a little bit that, all the pundits, the loud voices in the room, were saying it's going to be, a red wave, a tsunami. The Democrats are going to get wiped out. And while the Democrats did lose a few seats in the House, it was generally a victory because it wasn't what people were expecting. You go back a few years and in lots of discussions like this, there have been some loud voices in the room. I remember one maybe 5, 6 years ago. Somebody was up there adamantly saying print is dead. You know what? Print's still alive and kicking. Journals are still a very important part of the media mix that's out there. We're going to hear kind of where it fits in today. So to run through these slides a little bit, when we ask physicians about sources of information that they rely on, 45 different information sources, what we see, and it should be no surprise to anybody in this room who comes from the print side, medical journals, both digital and print, have significant reach. They're up in the top 5 or 6 media sources out of 45 different information sources, ranging from salespeople to meetings to web portals to journals. And I think that the thing to look at in any of this information is, how are things trending? Is it going off the cliff? No, it's not. I mean, what we're seeing is digital continues to increase importance, but it's not a zero-sum game. Print is not dying as a result of digital growing. There's more opportunities out there. When we ask doctors what version of a journal do they read, 91%, the same as it's been for the last 4 years and probably 10 years before that, are still saying print is important. They do read other versions. They also read print. When you look at how they're reading both print and digital, we see that 86% say that they read both print and digital. And that number has stayed very, very consistent over the last 4 years, the last 10 years before that. When you look at which version they read most, now we're beginning to see a trend here, right? So back in 2019, 64% said that print was what they read most. And it's been trickling down a little bit. It's still close to 50%. And the key thing is they're still reading the journal in one format or another, right? So I think that this is a lot of what we're going to talk about today is journals are important, and print is still an important component of that. So, how does that play out when we look? I mean, those were like general, broad questions. When we look at specific readership, and I'm just going to show 2 different specialties. When we look at actual journal readership as we measure it, and we look at an average of the top 3 journals, the top 5 journals, the top 10 journals, the average of all the journals in a specialty. Yes, it's trickled down a little bit. The top 3 has gone from 54% in cardiology for average issue readers down to 49%. It hasn't gone to 20%. It hasn't gone to 5%. It still is up there. And if you notice, and this may be partly driven by the fact that some journals have come out of the market, the average for all the journals in cardiology has actually increased over this time period. Yeah. What about neurology? Same thing. What about something like onc and hem-onc, where there's so much going on digitally, there's so much of a... You know what? The numbers are essentially the same. Yes, they've come from 60, 59 down to 55, 54. Again, the average number for all the journals in the oncology market has come up. So, this is just the context for the discussion. That's all I'm going to share, except for the fact what's driving it, right? So the reason why the readership is still there is when you look at what's important as a source of information for keeping abreast of new medical developments, medical journals, whether we're talking digital or in print, remain in the top 8 or 10 information sources that physicians rely on. Interesting jump this year in the journal, digital websites have always been important, and it's been the up-to-dates and the Medscapes and things like that. Journals this year really jumped in terms of the digital importance. But again, it's not at the expense of print. Print has stayed basically the same for the last 4, 5, 6 years. So I'll leave that up. We'll move over to our panel. Could each of you do a quick intro?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I think I know most of you. I'm Kerrie Sovelove. I work at SSCG Media. I've been there for almost 20 years. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to be seeing everyone today. I'm happy to participate on this panel, and I hope that everyone finds it useful and informative.
Hi, I'm Megan Lotorto, Group Director at Initiative. I've been at Initiative for about 2.5 years. I've been at agencies before then, so I may know some of you from my time there as well. I've worked across oncology, neurology, immunology, a number of opportunities in the infectious disease space as well. Excited to be here and talk with these ladies. So thanks for listening to us and Kerrie about what we have to say.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keira Durate. I'm from Publicis Health Media. Definitely see some familiar faces in the audience as well. I've been at PHM for going on 7 years, I think, something like that. And I'm a media director working across a number of different disease types, mainly oncology and some small niche conditions as well. And definitely excited to be here and to chat all things print.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being here and participating. By the way, we're hoping that this topic is good enough and important enough that it's something that we're going to be doing on a regular basis, not just this one panel, but as we get back into in-person events, in 23, that will continue this. So let's start. I mean, how has your use of print changed in the last few years? I mean, when you think about what you were doing 4 or 5 years ago, what you're doing today, how has that evolved when you think about how you're using it within a campaign?
Sure. I think it may not have, the last 4 or 5 years may not have been so much. I think it's maybe 10 years. 10 years might have been more. Print, we did, as you said before, there was a time when we thought, oh my God, print's going to die. Like, it's not going to be around anymore. And that was 20 years ago, it was 15 years ago, it was 10 years ago, and everything we're seeing is saying that exactly what you're saying, that it's not dead and it's not going anywhere. So I think what we've seen as, over the years as things have evolved is that there is a hyper awareness of targeting to a particular physician, right? So we always said, well, you could do that, but print is a broad-based medium, and that's not really what people want to hear anymore. So I think one of the things that has really occurred in the past maybe 5 to 10 years is targeting to a list match for physicians, right? And really beyond anything to it's beyond the can I get the back cover, it's cover tips, inserts, or outserts, things of that nature, the really, really large, high impact that they're looking for. So they're looking to reach them before they even get into the journal, and they're looking to reach just the particular ones that they want to reach. So I think that's kind of where we've seen one of the largest changes coming out for us. And I think the other thing that we were talking about this morning is there used to be a planning season, right? And now, right, there's no longer a planning season. It's kind of January through December. So what had happened is at that point was, you put everything on the schedule and you go forward and everything happens as you had it planned. There's a lot of buy-ups now, right? We get the word, we have a buy-up, we need to be in market. What more can we do in market immediately? And I think that's something where, we have a little bit of a hurdle with print, because if they want to be out there next month, we're looking at 6 weeks for print. So that's something that, that we've discussed, that we're kind of seeing that has changed things. So when you're being in a very reactive market, print may not be as reactive as some of the other channels.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that what's changed more recently is that we're just more purposeful every year. And when I say purposeful, what I mean is the cover wraps, the cover tips. Not only do we want to have a level of frequency, but we want to make sure that we're seen, right? We have to be purposeful with how we are getting that message across. And I think a lot of that comes with the message itself. So how important is your creative campaign? And can you tell your full story in a banner asset? The answer is usually no, because I can't fit my whole story there. So I think that instead of just looking at frequency and that we're hitting these HCPs around the print channel, we're looking mostly at, are we hitting them at the right publication? And that's when we look at sources like Kantar. So I think that we're more purposeful. I do think that things have changed throughout the year. Although the big planning season is at the end of the year for the new year, throughout the year, unfortunately, like the print, the measurability of print, like, isn't there throughout the year. So if there are budget changes, I mean, we're going to tend to look at reporting throughout the year that is leaning into that. Whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, we would have been looking more at, we have this print asset, let's increase our touch points at print. So I think that that's something that has changed a little bit over the years for us.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, a couple points earlier around MPI targeting and just using list match, I think that's a really big piece that I've seen on the accounts that I'm working on, is that we're really interested in what Dr. Joe is doing and doctors that look like Dr. Joe. And we're really getting into how can we best engage that very specific doctor. And I spoke earlier that I work in very kind of niche audiences where we're really only targeting a handful of physicians. I say a handful, but a very small portion of the HCP universe. So when we think about different channels that we're looking to target, print is one of those areas where it is much more of a broader play, but then understanding within our target list, how can we make sure that we're still reaching them? And then also, what type of medium are they most likely to engage with? Are we looking more closely at Dr. Joe, who's more interested in going to the website, or are they more interested in print? So we're really interested in getting down to that finite identification of what a specific doctor or a specific small population is doing and how can we best engage them. Print's definitely part of that conversation, but it's more so how can we leverage the trust and the reach of the publication to reach that audience. So I think that's something, I'm sure we'll be exploring later on, is really understanding that targetability and the measurability across the universe of a publication.
Yeah, and that's actually, I mean, it's a great segue into, if we look at kind of the two, the positives and the negatives about print. So what are the things that print does well? What do you look for print to do within a campaign that either only print can do or that print does really well? And then the flip side, and everybody's touched on this, is what are some of the challenges, the measurability, the targetability, and so on and so forth. So, maybe let's start with why do we still love print? I mean, why does it still work and belong in a schedule?
We love print because it is where HCPs are. I mean, we work in oncology, and that is one treatment area in particular. All the data points to we need to have room on our plan for this important channel. And the journals that are so valued by the HCPs within our target list and our associations, and we talk about conference a lot in oncology because there's always new data coming out and new indications and all of that. So I think what we love is the relevancy, right? You're not going to have your lack of content alignment, for example. You never have to worry about that with print. You never have to worry about the HCP feeling pushed with too many emails. It is very much a part of their organic journey as a professional. And those are the things that we really appreciate. I mean, the flexible scheduling is nice. There is, my favorite part about print is that it is not only a premium placement, as we call them, but they really stand out. They stand out more than a premium placement digitally in a lot of ways, because it's not on a news feed that you're scrolling through. Actually stop, open this poly bag, and see the special edition. So those are probably my key differentiators when I'm looking at print planning.
For me, it's trust, I think, is like the biggest piece because, again, going back to kind of really trying to engage a very niche audience or a very specific audience, working in oncology, knowing that there's just so much data, potentially a lot of competition from other products, also looking at just some of the key challenges in getting the attention of an oncologist. I think print is one of those places where, to your point, it's part of their professional journey. They trust journals. They know that the content is peer reviewed. They know that the content and the data is valid. And so I think outside of there's very few mediums where that trust is really 110%. And so with particular audiences, I think print is one of the few places where we can definitively say that that contextual trust is there. And so when you're kind of leveraging multiple ad units and trying to kind of look at your overall plan, like I think print is always one of those places, especially for specific HCPs.
And it grabs you, right? It's beautiful. I mean, when you see some of these print ads, they pull you in. They're spectacular. You want to read them. You want to look at them, the colors, everything else. To Megan's point earlier, it tells a message. It's a mini detail in there. So it's a place when you have a large message, if you have a new message. We love print for all of those reasons. I remember placing my first insertion order, and then when you get it, you're like, I did that. Okay, I didn't create the ad, but it wouldn't be in this journal if I hadn't faxed out this insertion order to that publisher. Dating myself, I need to stop doing that. But it was, yeah, it's truly amazing when you see those ads and when you see, you sit down with the creative agency and you get all the specs and you talk about wafer peels and all this stuff, and then you see it and you're like, wow, it just came together. So digital ads are nice, but they're not spectacular.
It's an interesting topic because when you think about the interactions that you have with salespeople, a lot of what we hear is nobody wants to talk about print anymore. Let's focus on digital, let's focus on digital. But I suspect that there is some aspect of these discussions around unique opportunities, about special units, about what they can do with outserts or tips, or can they take the wafer thing and, whatever. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And, is a lack of discussion around print, the basics of print, not because you don't care, but because you already know what you're doing? If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Sure, I think, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how TV, we had the 7 channels when we were growing up, again, dating myself, and now there's like a plethora. It's the same thing with print. Like we had print, you had prescription pads, you had like a couple other things, but now there's just so much. So it's become a smaller part of the conversation, but it doesn't mean it's not as important a part of the conversation. And we talk about print again. We try to, we've been talking at SSCG about say the word journal, because print really, I mean, there is no journal anymore that doesn't have a digital presence, right? So we're trying to talk about it as a holistic approach to talk about the journal and where physicians are reading that journal. So yeah, I think that's part of it.
I think that we want to talk about the publication. I don't think that we talk enough about the publications. What are the differentiators? What makes the opportunity unique? What is your digital presence like? And what is that bridge between print and the digital versions or the digital content that's being curated? What are those, what does that journey look like? Where are the HCPs? So I think that we want to talk about print, but we want to talk about or I want to talk about the publication itself. Like, that's what we need the reps to sort of lean into. What's your story? What makes, a digital endemic publisher different from the next? They find ways to sort of tell that story and figure that out. At the end of the day, are they all that different? That is for sort of us to determine based on the information that we have access to. But what is your publication? Like, who are you? And who are you not only this year, but who are you trying to be in the next planning year? And I still just want to talk about the journal itself, the digital versions and the print versions. So I think approaching from that perspective more, I think would make the conversations more exciting and different. Because to your point, it's not that people don't want to talk about print. It's just that we've heard a lot of the same stuff. So
Yeah, definitely. And we were chatting about this before. It's kind of like print is almost like seen as that one of those foundational tactics if you have the budget and the asset. It's kind of like, okay, we know what's there, we know how to buy it, we know, we look at Kantar, we see the top journals that our HCPs are engaging with, and then we go out and buy them. There's really not a lot of, I'd say, more strategy than that. And I think, to your point, that's really what we're looking for from the publications, is really looking at their universe holistically and providing us, the agencies, with a recommendation on how we can best reach that audience across their portfolio of assets, and really helping guide that conversation. Because I think print is definitely always in the conversation, but it's really, to everyone's earlier point, about the journal and its reach and its trust, the content, what is actually going to be covered in potential future issues, how can we best optimize our buying to best target that particular content. So I think we are trying to be strategic across our other channels, working with different digital partners to understand what's the best endemic environment that we want to look into. But it's kind of pulling in that framework from a journal perspective is what we feel would be the most influential to our clients when we're talking about print. Because I think today it's really kind of looking at, okay, what are the top 3 to 4 journals that my audience is engaging with? Let's go out there and see what we can get, versus kind of thinking about it more across the full ecosystem.
You mentioned talking to clients about it. How much of the decision to be active in print is driven by the client versus your recommendation to the client? And do you feel like clients have a good perspective on print, or is there education that needs to happen? Because you're dealing with a lot of people who probably are digital natives. They that's their world. They know how they do things. They don't necessarily think about how doctors do things.
I can kind of jump right in there. I come from, most of my clients are very digitally focused. They're very attached to measurability, ROI. They want to know, back to Dr. Joe, where is he engaging, and is he writing more scripts? And they're really kind of focused in on that measurability. So I'd say that in some ways it is very client driven. Sometimes there's not a push to, pay the creative agency to create a, 9-page print asset. They may feel that their dollars are better suited in an environment that has that high measurability so they can prove the output. But I do think that agencies, we always have that level of pull when we're having those conversations with clients to say, no, you really do need to be in this publication, and this is why. And again, kind of going back to my earlier point, just being strategic around what that looks like, buying the journal versus buying the actual print book. So I think that it's definitely something that could be challenged if a client isn't necessarily pushing towards print. I think it's more about kind of having that validity and having that overall approach from the journal perspective versus just the print book.
I think from our perspective, the client that we're working with, we really we have a very large research group at SSCG, and we do quite a bit of internal research, and from MapMD, we have a lot of stats that show exactly what you're talking about, that print is one of the most trusted. And then we also have a channel planning tool that shows us when we should be using print. So we can go back. We do have some metrics in that area. We do try and drive it for all of the reasons that we've been discussing. We do try and drive the conversation that print, in a lot of cases should be on the schedule. There are certain cases where maybe, it's just too small of a budget or something of that nature where, it's hard to make a case, but that, because of the ecosystem, you want to have print on so that you're reaching it at all touch points. So another thing that we've seen is that a lot of the print publications, the physicians are saying they read this at night. So although we can't take this and put this into, a data engine and show all of the ROI and show all of the touch points that we're looking for, we do have that information that even if you're looking, throughout the day for the physician, and again, the omni-channel journey for them, that it is reaching them at a point when other things may not be reaching them. So we try and bring, just small data points like that, maybe just a call out on the slide, just so they're aware of it. But it takes a lot of education on our end to speak to the brand leads and the brand teams, because, they're younger and they're getting more, as far as they're seeing it. But you have to also say, like, aren't there any print publications in your household? Like, don't you have things that you like to read in print? So, there are those data points as well that we can try and point out to them.
Yeah, I think the clients are knowledgeable. I think that's my short answer. I do think that, to Keira and Kerrie's points, it's really what we put in front of them, and that's our responsibility, and we're accountable for that. We're accountable for pointing out value. We're accountable for pointing out the top publications that we pull, and we're accountable for taking the opportunities that the reps are bringing to us and vetting them, right? Challenging them, building a story with your digital approach as well, your digital footprint too. So I do think that they're knowledgeable. I do think that at the end of the day, the budget holder is going to be the final decision maker for sure. But the participation of journals within a plan, I think that's decided upon early on, and I think that it's all built on data, participation sort of numbers, and really some highlighted strategic partners that you're going to go into your tactical plan with.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So everybody's touched on some of the challenges, the measurability, the targetability. Can we dive a little bit more into what those challenges are, and maybe how, either as an industry or individual publishers, we can begin to help support that? And maybe it's holy grail, maybe there's not stuff that, getting to a measurable ROI just may not be possible, right? But what would you like to see, and where are those challenges right now? Or do you want to, or Kerrie?
Okay, so what I would say is we do talk about data a lot with online, and there is a data component to print, and that is your circulation, right? So sometimes, many years ago, I was asked by a publisher, by a client, to do a list match to see which journals were matching. And this was when I had been in print for a long time, and I said they all go to the same circulation. Everybody goes to the same circulation. And we did the list match, and I was wrong. So there were ones that matched much higher and ones that matched much lower, and I was really shocked because I had always been told, we're all going to the same. We're all going to the same. So I think that is really, really one of the areas that we would love to see, is that the circulations are as robust and as clean as possible, so that when we do a list match, we can get the highest that we can. And another thing that we actually do look at and we put emphasis on is BPA. So if you can always get if you can have your journal BPA audited. I understand there are a lot of societies in the room right now, and I realize that they don't always want to be BPA audited, or may not feel that they need to do that, and we understand that. But if you can get BPA audited, that is another measuring point that we can bring to the clients. And I think, again, if we open up the BPA and we see that there are, 60% has been verified in the last year and 40% hasn't been verified for 3 years, that's like that's another not great data point. So I think getting a circulation manager and making sure that they are on top, as much on top of the data as you can be, that's what, we would definitely look for. One of the areas, right? One of the areas we can definitely try and narrow in and look for from this end.
I'd love to see a little bit more connectivity between the print publications and the digital. And I think the biggest question there is, yes, if we know that Dr. Joe is getting a print book, but also how is he or she engaging on the website, and potentially what content are they interested in? Because I think that can help guide further print insertions and strategy around how you're buying the print journal from a strategic standpoint if you do have limited budget, because I think having that holistic story at an MPI level can be super helpful when you're making decisions, and also trying to think about how you best optimize your budget. Because I think that's a big question that we often get is, we know that you are reaching a certain universe of HCPs, but like really where are they, and where are they putting more of their time and effort from a content perspective? So I think that's another area where I would think it would be potentially, I don't want to say easy to do, but an opportunity to essentially say, okay, we have a distribution. We know that this particular group of doctors is getting the print journal. Can we then track at an MPI level on the site just to see how often they're visiting the site, what pages they're visiting, and then pull some sort of report that can kind of connect the two, to say like, listen, we know that Dr. Joe is visiting this website, twice a month, and he's also getting our, bi-monthly publication. So that is, then we can go back to our clients and say, hey, listen, we know that 60% of our audience is engaging on both, and we know that they're visiting, the website twice a month, and we know that they're getting the monthly publication. This is going to be a more valuable buy than potentially another book where this same group of doctors is only visiting once every 3 months. So I think that helps us make more strategic decisions.
Given the fact that a lot of societies don't, the whole concept of PLD is just not, it's not going to happen for whatever reasons, but if they were able to provide that kind of information at sort of a de-identified aggregated level, so it's not Dr. Joe Smith, but to be able to say 60% of our oncologists who work with breast cancer patients are using both the website and the newsletter and blah, blah, blah. Is that still a step in the right direction?
Absolutely. Again, to your point, PLD, privacy concerns may not happen in the immediate future, but I definitely think at least specialty, especially for journals that hit a whole bunch of different specialties, right? Like we really need to know, what are cardiologists doing? What are oncologists doing? So I think any data that can be provided at the specialty level is super helpful.
Yeah, and I think changes year over year is going to be important. How much of your circulation is leaning more into print versus, we have the Kantar data, so that tells us, but for your publication, who's leaning more into print, how much of your audience is leaning more into digital, and how much of that audience is doing both. So what that brings us to another actionable, I think, takeaway that we could talk about is the editorial. What people are going to the journals for is the peer-reviewed content. So what is exclusive to the journal versus what can't be found anywhere else? That is a differentiator. That is what's driving HCPs to pay attention in the journal and thus engage with our brand in some way, or our campaign in some way. So I think that we would all benefit from probably more insight into that, whether it's it could be, your editorial calendar, and it could be content pieces that are only available in the journal itself. It could be sharing with us what the digital journey looks like for someone who's consuming the online version, understanding what they are seeing and how they're going through that, whether it's over a 2-week period or whether it's in one sitting, however it may be. I think it's just more diving into the individual journal and publication, regardless of whether it's society and can't provide us with the PLD or the MPI data, or whether it's a publication that does offer NPI targeting. So I think just diving into the publications themselves and building a story there and talking about the changes year over year in whatever direction is going to be really valuable to our planning process.
I'm going to toss out a question that we hadn't talked about before, but I mean, some number of publications have ceased print over the last few years, but still have an online presence. Has that changed as you think about a journal or a publication as an overall brand, which may be print, digital, newsletters, projects, whatever it may be? Has that changed your perspective on those brands, those media brands, if there's no longer a print component? Sorry for throwing
No, that's a really good question. I think if the brand has been out long enough, then it still holds. If it was a newer brand, perhaps not so much, but if it was a very well-established name that the physicians know, then that could still hold value. We'd have to see, obviously we then can assess on the digital numbers. But yeah, I think for us, I think it would depend on how established it was to begin with. If it's,
I think I don't work with a lot of clients that make decisions just out of budget, and it sort of depends why they're cutting print. There has to be a reason. There has to be a motivating factor driving that decision, and that's what I would be concerned about. And I think that my job is to really make people aware of that. Like if a client is coming and saying we don't want to do print anymore, where we've decided to cut it as a creative scope, whatever it may be. I think that we need to dive into that more and make sure that we're making the right decisions for the right treatment area, for the right target audience, because we have to have a story when we go to measure things and we look at things like ROI and prescription data, script lift, no matter what, that's going to be looked at, and even if it's NPP in general. So pulling something like a print out, we all just have to be prepared to tell that story and be ready for that story 6 months later when we look at the ATU or we look at the ROI data that comes out of it. So yeah, I think that clients are smarter these days. They don't just pull without grounding that and having rationale.
And I'd say I don't think it's to your earlier point, Kerrie, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of print versus digital. Again, I think it goes back to where is the audience, and if there is an enriched, engaged audience on your .com and you made that business decision to pull your print books, I think we're right on board with you, as long as you're able to kind of carry on that audience and carry on that engagement and the quality of the content isn't shifting. There really wouldn't be a reason for us to, deter from working with a particular journal if it's digital only.
Yeah, and it depends on the treatment area too. I think that we would be talking about that for a long time before it happened. I mean, working in oncology, it's sort of unimaginable really to pull because of these societies and associations and the value of them and the importance of them, and print being sort of the way in which we engage with those audiences in a lot of ways. It impacts your conference budgets. So I think it's more so sort of poking holes in that decision and making sure that we're pulling in our strategic partners along the way, which we would definitely look towards our partnerships to sort of help us guide clients in a way that supports the data and supports the brand in its life cycle, probably.
Yeah, let's talk about those partnerships. I mean, what's your relationship like with publisher sales reps, perhaps in the context of other people that you interact with? What's the relationship like? What would you most like to see? If there were a few things that you could ask people sitting in this room or on the computer out there, how could they improve the relationship with you? I mean, we've touched on a little bit of this, but
yeah, I think that collaboration that Keira spoke to before with the digital arm of the company or the digital arm of the publication, that's going to be probably the most important thing for us moving forward. We have strong relationships. I think that that really goes to communication. Our reps are really there for us with the information that we're asking for. I think that We have opportunities to chat throughout the planning season, I think, and really a lot of budget decisions require us to go back to the partner and to say, here's like what I want to do. Here, I can't do it the way I'm envisioning it. Help me come up with a better concept that works for either the budget or the creative assets I have available to me and so forth.
We're talking about, you know, the journal as a brand, and it has different legs to it. So I think something that we were talking about earlier is it can be slightly disjointed when you have someone that you talk to for the print and someone that you talk to for the digital. So I would say that getting everyone together on so that you just have one person for the brand would be really, really helpful, because that can sometimes be, again, just a little, I have to go to this person and I have to go to that person, and then, you know, you're making 2 calls for one brand, and you're making 2 emails, really. Who doesn't call anymore? But you're making 2 emails for one brand. So I think that, like, looking at, you know, and having discount programs, right? So if you're, I don't see that too often. So like discount programs for the brand. If you're in the print or in the digital, you know, then you would get a discount on this piece of it. So looking at it as a holistic view, because sometimes we were saying we feel like it's a little chopped up. So the whole brand together.
And just to piggyback on that, I think that'll help our buys be more cost efficient, potentially, if there's any sort of, you know, value adds or discounts that are part of more of like a packaged buy, but also more strategic too. So kind of going back to what we were talking about with some of the potential opportunities in measurability, it's kind of like, we look at your publication as a brand, we want to make sure that we're investing in certain avenues based on where the doctors are, or where they're more likely to engage, or where we're seeing the most potential, you know, repeat visibility or repeat visitation on your particular landing pages, whatever the case may be. Like, helping us holistically plan and budget accordingly, I think, is really important, because of that kind of broader picture that we're kind of trying to paint with the client and trying to understand where that overall HCP journey is. So we really would love to partner with the reps more, I'd say, less so transactional and more so strategic.
Planning season is now a 12-month process, but perhaps you're a little bit more in looking forward to 23 right now. Publishers are looking forward. Overall, I mean, not specifically journal-based, but where do you see ad budgets going? I mean, there's a lot of recessionary talk right now. Is that coming into play? You know, what are you hearing from your clients in terms of what you're going to have to work with in the next 12 months?
Full steam ahead. We haven't heard anything. You know, every time, you know, everything we've heard is status quo. Everything is good. Just keep on doing what you're doing. We haven't, you know, we haven't heard anything. And I think we all can say that I'm sure that both of you are missing a lot of people from the agencies. You know, we're probably still all staffing up. So we're trying to get that portion. But yeah, it's, you know, we haven't seen, at least we haven't seen a lot of drop off or a lot of precautionary conversations or anything of that nature. So everything's looking good for 2023.
Yeah, I think in oncology, everybody's really looking forward to the conferences being in person. We have conferences like ASH, who were never not in person, but they're excited for that, I think. I have not, I'm in the same boat. I think that everything has been stable. I think it depends on your brand and where it is in the life cycle and what the priorities are for the brand and the franchise as a whole, depending on how many brands they have within a certain treatment area. But I think it's all thoughtful. I think that if something is lower, there's going to be a reason for it, and likely that investment is going to go towards other opportunities within the brand or the umbrella.
Different strategies, different tactics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add there. Very similar. I think, you know, every brand's a little bit different, but where there are budget cuts, I think, you know, there's a strong focus on kind of your block and tackle tactics, which in a lot of cases can be print if there is an asset. Additionally, like conferences, which we haven't talked too much about, but I think when we think about just optimizing budget and ensuring that we're present at those key moments. Conferences is also a really big part of kind of where we lean in, and also pulling in print buys specifically to align with conference months or when there's potential data that will be covered. Anything that's kind of covered from a conference is really kind of a key point of focus for us if there's any sort of budgetary restraints and we really want to be super targeted and strategic. So those are a couple of things that came to mind, but I think even coming out of the pandemic, my brands have been doing very well. So fingers crossed.
And as the conferences become more in person again, that's just going to accelerate the need to tie in with that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I also think that we should talk a little bit about our support of personal promotion too. So I think that now that the reps are back in offices, has that fully stabilized for all? Probably not. But every year, there's more and more focus on how are we going to support the personal promotion side that really measures ROI pretty directly and more often probably than NPP. So I think that the effort there is evolving in a really positive way. And print journals, they really provide us with a great opportunity to build on those core visual aids and help support that brand story and find ways in which to engage with the HCP at conferences, to Keira's point, and also in the office if that's where they're consuming the print media. So I also thought that was something.
Yeah, what about reprints? I mean, because that sort of ties in as a tool that salespeople can be using. Is that something that at one point it was a big thing. Are you still seeing demand for that from your clients?
I have not seen a lot more demand in reprints. I think you're right. I think it used to be, and it's not. They're not as much leaning into NPP budgets to do it if it's happening.
Right, I think that's what they used to come to us, and I think they might have another team that handles it as well. So it might be happening, and we're not aware of it.
Right.
It's like a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah, because it ties in so directly with supporting the salespeople who are out there talking to the doctors. Mm-hmm. So interesting. Is there anything that we should be doing just as an industry to help support the story around journals? And it may be back to the measurability things, but I mean, are there things that collectively we can be working on together that would help tell that story of the effectiveness of journals, help get that message through to the clients?
I think like any insights that you can share about your viewership. We touched on this a little bit with measurability, but I think it's kind of like more of that story, and more so understanding just the content, your audience, how they engage and why, and just getting a sense of any of your data that you've collected or any insights that you've collected, because we definitely see that so much on the digital side. Clients are expecting to kind of understand the quote unquote value add of working with a particular digital publication, but it's also understanding that story from y'all's point of view, because I think it's something that is a little bit lacking. We're really just going we're buying journals based on the Kantar data and potentially on list match, and I think that's pretty much it. But we'd love kind of more data, and I say data, but more so just insights. Anything that can help us kind of formulate the story on why we should go with your journal versus another.
Yeah, and I think about continuing from that, our responsibility is at the right time to bring in our customer insights and analytics teams who really, once we get that engagement and sort of trending data from you for your specific publication, I think that's when we bring in our measurement teams who are responsible for building that story throughout the year. Unfortunately, I just don't think that we get enough now to bring those folks in, but they're going to be the heroes in helping us to pull all of this data together and come up with a way on a recurring basis to measure it. So to your point, I think it's a collaborative effort. And a lot of it, once we know we can get the data that we can get from the publishers and the digital insights that bridge the gap with the print insights, bringing in those customer insights folks to really help tell that story. And those, we understand what we get from a digital perspective too, figuring out ways to connect those and just build a story.
Yeah, and it's the data and it's the story behind the data.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's the key point that, you know, Megan and Keira have been saying, is that storytelling. So in media, that has become so big for us, for, you know, every brand plan is, what is the story? How do we tell the story? And that's become really big to us. And it's become, you know, when you just had print on there wasn't a story to be told. And with strategies and all of these great tactics now, it really is about telling the story, because that's how you sell that this is the right thing into the client. And so I think that's what we're looking for, a bit of storytelling for us from the publications.
That's great. I'd like to open this up for questions from the audience or other topics. If there's something that you want to touch on, you know, let's toss it out. But I mean, is there, please?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Yeah, just.
I'll stand. Know that, like, when I've been on the consumer side of things, innovative, connecting digital. Oh, thank you. I think you guys.
There's video.
Oh, okay. The question was, how do you feel about the future of print, knowing that there's a lot of innovation pull with like QR codes and connecting digital to print, but something tangible, I agree, is like long lasting. It leaves an impression. So if you guys could speak to that at all.
Yeah, I think that QR codes is a great example. It's like the podcast. Like, clients were like, oh my, they're nothing. And then all of a sudden, podcasts were like really big, right? The same thing with QR codes. Did it happen during COVID? So I think that's a really great way to bring people in, is QR codes. I mean, you know, some in our research group and our analytics team have said, like, every ad should have a QR code, because if we can just put it on there and you can even just get a few people to go through, it can make that a whole experience, right? And so, and I think people now with, I mean, I never used QR codes, and now you know, every time I sit down at a restaurant, I'm using a QR code. So I think everybody's now familiar. It's just like second nature at this point. I mean, I think the future of print is really, really bright. I really do. I think it's not going away. As we said, like 20 years ago, we were like, oh, God, yeah, that's going to be gone. And it's not going anywhere. And I think the one thing we've talked about, when publications have gone away and they just have a digital presence, there are digital presences in the last 10 years that have come into a publication. So we've seen that as well, which is really interesting. And it shows that there is room for things. They do want print. There are room for new publications. So I think it's the making sure you're getting to the right folks, and as many of them as you can, and making sure your content is as compelling as it is, you know, as you can be, whether that's, you know, further investigating with your readers, or, you know, sending out surveys with every issue, or whatever it is, but to make sure that that's popping up there, because that is the one thing that we're seeing, that it's just not as deep as it was, right? So we used to go 10, 15, 20 journals deep, 30 journals deep in primary care. And I mean, obviously, a lot of those have folded. We all remember when that existed. But yeah, we're not going very deep, so it's got to be up there.
I think that we're going to continue to see a depth in our relationships with publishers, but less. I think that we'll probably continue to engage with the top publishers within, whether it's specialty or target list reach, whatever you have, and those relationships will be where you get the depth, mostly because the frequency, the touch points. It will look, a print plan can look repetitive on the surface, but what we want to get more into, and what another area we hope to evolve, is just getting that publication story out there, and that publication plan, digital touch points and print touch points, and just evolving in some of the actionable ways we've sort of discussed today. So I think like more of strategic partnerships, but maybe like less than you saw 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have too much to add there. I think you kind of made the couple points that I was thinking of, but yeah, definitely. I think there is so many different publications out there based on specialty, and I think we'll continue to see some of those like very top, highly read journals be where the majority of budget and strategy or strategic buying will go, just because of that. The ability to kind of reach very deeply with those particular publications. But I do think that it'll really just depend. I think, to everyone's point, like there is that need for measurability and kind of connectivity between the digital arm and the print arm. And then I think that those publications who are able to kind of make that leap and kind of tie in that story, I could imagine would be more prioritized by advertisers moving forward, because it's just going to help kind of tie in that whole HCP journey when we think about the overall brand plan, because everyone is thinking about things very holistically now. And I think that that's just the way that everyone's kind of mindset is. We're not thinking about things in silos anymore. It's very much like looking at the macro view and how these different channels kind of work together to drive our overall objective.
Yeah, and I think as there's a consolidation of the buy into the more leading journals, I mean, to your point, I mean, it used to be you'd go 15 journals deep, and now it's 3 or 5 in oncology or whatever it might be. There's a natural, there's economics at play here that especially commercial publishers, if the ad dollars aren't there, they can't keep going. So there will be continued consolidation in this industry, but that's not a bad thing, because the leading journals are going to be even more impactful. That it's going to be a more important information source for the doctors. The ads will stand out. It's just everything kind of plays towards that, I think. And so, for all the reasons that you shared, and then the underlying economics, journals aren't going away. The number of journals may contract some from what we can see.
Summaries are taking up most of your budget. And then if you're trying to do an insert, the cost of paper is ridiculous. So the cost of doing print is so high. So a lot of times clients will have to say, I have to cut back from that, because you're seeing 8-page brief summaries, and paper, forget about. So
Yeah, we talked about this
yeah.
at length. And it didn't come up yet, but there is an unpredictability factor with print, because my black and white pages increase and my cost goes up. If I have a really big plan compared to like the 15 publishers or 30 publishers you used to have on your plan, that's a huge undertaking to replan. So I think that that's something that we could lean on, and that's what we talked about a little bit, is like maybe an action item coming out of this for the publishers is coming up with some sort of flat policy on the number of pages, because in oncology we struggle with this a lot. Something will go from 4 to 8 pages in 30 seconds of a call with a creative agency, and then we have to replan. So yes, I am seeing that. I assume you see that too.
Yeah, it's tough, because I think we try to plan as best we can, but to your point, it kind of blows everything up when your page count increases. But I think maybe there's a way to do X amount of black and white pages is a flat rate, and because it's not the ad, it's just the ISI, and it's killing us. So I think there's potential ways there. And then again, potentially looking at, all right, if you're investing X amount because you have such a large asset, like what's the little value add that you can throw in there? Like, is there like some digital buys that you can include? Like, is there, something as an incentive? Because there's certain things that unfortunately we just can't control, but like knowing that we're investing so much and it's more of a technicality, so to speak. Is there additional ways that there could be a value add to kind of help offset some of those costs?
Well, and you talk about industry level activities, and maybe one of the things that has to happen is that as an industry, we need to push the FDA to allow truly a brief summary as opposed to, in an online environment, it's just they're scrolling, nobody's looking at it.
No.
So why not allow the same thing in print and make it a little bit more efficient?
If you could do that with the FDA, that would really be amazing
That's
for
not our
us.
homework.
Volunteer you,
Why don't you
Kerrie.
just go down to DC and just make some inroads? We would all appreciate it.
Hi, are you seeing utilizing print more often based on the life cycle of your brands? And if so, is it more based on data, new releasing of data, or coming soon ads? Because we have seen a little bit more of the unbranded ads recently.
I think I work on quite a few launch brands over the past several years, and I think we leverage print really heavily during launch periods. I think also print's one of those areas where we can do kind of like strategic plays where we'll have like an unbranded asset that's kind of owning the space, and then we can turn it to a now approved as soon as we're approved, and then we kind of have this we've kind of blocked the real estate with our brand kind of leading up to approvals. So I think there's a lot of ways that we've leveraged print during those kind of key life cycle moments with the brand to kind of be strategic when we think about when we're heavily investing in print, especially with like cover tips, cover wraps, like those sorts of opportunities around conferences or launches I think are really important for us too.
I think what you're seeing with the unbranded approach is that it is a really effective way to tell the story, and there are limitations to the opportunities with branded assets once we do launch for us to do that. So that's great that you're seeing that. I think it says something about sequencing, and it says something about the creative agencies and brand being committed to that story and investing where they can in order to do so. Some of my favorite ads are like the DSA ads, and they just start to tell the story a little better. Yeah. But yeah, key launch periods, unbranded launches, and then conferences too, because they can grab at the conference. Yeah.
We love a little booth driver.
Yeah.
Are any of your clients beginning to factor in sustainability practices of publishers in their consideration of which journals to engage with?
That is a wonderful question. I have not seen that myself. I think one area that they're looking in more than we've seen before is we are now investigating all of our partners to see what type of diverse partners we have.
Yeah.
So we haven't done anything with sustainability, but we have gone into some awareness of our partners who are diverse.
No, I have not. But I think the diversity is probably the key concept that comes up. And also, I think by the time the creative undertaking is established, the number of pages sort of come in, and it probably gets like a little lower on the list of topics that we can really discuss because of the bounds at which we're sort of held to.
Yeah, same here. Nothing on the sustainability piece, but I think that's really interesting and kind of something that I'm going to keep an eye out for just in terms of how that's trending because, it is trees we are talking about and how that impacts kind of the kind of scope of what we think about. But no, haven't really seen that as a topic of conversation.
I think the brands care more about what the HCP is doing with it. I think like a direct mail example, I have heard those might be, not kept around as much as a journal. So I think it's really about what the HCPs are doing with them that the brands are focused on, or that's what I hear more.
One inconsequential question, and it may be the one to wrap up with, is are you largely back in the office and beginning to meet with reps in person again?
A little bit. I'm here in New York. Our offices are based in New York, and we're starting to come back about once a week. But I think the pandemic has really changed things. I mean, my team is scattered across. I work with 5 people, pretty much predominantly my media team, and we're all in different states. So I think it's definitely a challenge to come together, meet with reps in the same traditional way. You know, back in the good old days, we'd have, you know, a lunch and learn every single day where we were meeting with the partner, and then 3 times a week we were going out with partners to kind of build those deeper relationships, and we're just not seeing that even with return to office. So I think, you know, we were chatting a little bit about this earlier. We'll have to all get creative to figure out ways to come together again. And I think that's within media teams. Yay, AMM. That's within media teams and building our own connectivity, but also with reps as well, and finding ways to be more creative with how we do that now, being scattered.
So a good discussion is more important than a free sandwich?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we'll take the free sandwich. We'll never turn down the free sandwich or wine, you know, whatever. But I think, you know, the biggest piece is when we do come together, having really strong value there. And I think we touched a little bit on it earlier with print. You know, maybe there isn't anything new or quote unquote innovative, but like, what can we bring to the conversation that isn't just strictly kind of talking about, you know, reach and circulation and kind of the basics? Like, what are ways that we can kind of bring more education or more perceived value to the conversation, so that way, if we all are going to travel to a particular office to have a meeting or to talk through, you know, that we're really getting some deep value out of that one time a year that we might be able to actually come together.
What she said.
Well, Keira, Megan, Kerrie, thank you so much. This was a fantastic discussion.
Thank
Your
you.
insight was wonderful. Everybody.
Thank you.